This interview is being tape recorded. My name is Paul Leary and this is X Job Downloaded. And today I'm going to interview Ian Fritz Frakes. Have I said that correctly, sir?
You have. Fritz is a nickname.
Fritz is your nickname, yeah. So, Fritz, where did it all start for you, and what was your inspiration to join the police service?
The Sweeney.
The Sweeney, okay.
The Sweeney. Now, I was working in the music industry before I joined the job, which was great. I worked from 68 to 79 when I joined the old bill, and it was possibly the best time to have been in the music industry because radio programs had gone from music radio programs had gone from being pirate radio stations, which were destroyed by the BBC and the government. And then they employed all the pirate radio DJs, and it just went on from there. Radio 1 and 2 became pop stations and things. There were some really good record labels popping up at that time. But there were also the old standards. Decca Records were still going from before the war.
Yeah.
And in actual fact, they were the last Decca Records I worked for up till I joined the police. And it was just a laugh 24/7. It really was. And the money was good, obviously, else I wouldn't have been doing it. But then I met up with the first ex-Mrs. Frakes. And it was serious, and I thought, well, I want to, I've had me fun in the music industry, but if I'm going to settle down and get married, then I want something a bit more substantial than just like, have I still got a job on Monday? Because you never really knew. The competition in the music industry, you're virtually self-employed a lot of the time, but Decca Records was like working for Are You Being Served? The Grace Brothers.
Yep.
At that time, even in 1979, the boss of Decca Records was a bloke called Sir Edward Lewis, who had been in charge for decades. And Decca House was on the Albert Embankment. The building's still there. It's obviously very expensive flats now, overlook the Thames. And out of my office window, I could see into Lambeth. I think it was Lambeth Fire Station. They used to do a lot of training there. And I thought, that'd be a good career. So I watched these guys and got to know a few of them from the local pubs and things. And talked about it with the wife, applied for the fire brigade. They turned me down because of a knee injury that I'd had for a long time. And I got that sorted out and decided I'd apply for the police instead. Because, as I say, I liked the Sweeney.
Yeah.
And I like meeting people, as we used to tell guys. And so I applied for the Met. They wouldn't have me at the time. McNee had just taken over at that period. And I thought, well, it's obviously not meant to be. On the way home from my interview for the Met, I stepped out of Romford train station and this blue Triumph 2000 TC went by on a woo-woos with four of the heaviest blokes you've ever seen in your life sat in it, with a stick-on blue light on the top. And that just sort of got my juices flowing. So I applied for Essex and they had me, they grabbed me straight away, really. I did sit down and have an interview with the chief, Bob Bunyard. There was him in the middle and I think two superintendents, but I couldn't tell you who they were. And Bob said, so what have you been doing? So I told him, I've been in the music industry, been doing this, that and that. Me, motor mouth, as you're probably gathering by now. Start telling him a few of the things that I probably shouldn't have been telling him about all the sex, drugs, rock and roll and payola. And I'm talking away and my brain's saying, shut it, be quiet, keep quiet, don't tell him that. And I'll tell him that. And I just sort of dwindled out. I'd lost my breath, really. And I said, I suppose I've talked myself out of a job, really. Sorry to have wasted your time. And he said, no, not at all. He said, you've got so much experience in life. He said, basically, you're in. I remember taking a medical. I don't remember doing a fitness test. And I honestly don't remember doing an intelligence test either, because both of them probably would have failed me at the time. But I got in.
So I'm going to take you back a little bit. So where were you born?
Harold Hill.
Harold Hill.
Romford, Essex.
William the Conqueror public house.
Yes, mate. Yes. Billy the Conqueror. I could tell you a story about that place, but I won't because it's very naughty. Okay. Yes, born and bred, Harold Hill. Both my parents come from Bow in London, from the same street. Their families knew each other. And I'm the first of my generation to be born outside London. So almost within the sound of Bow Bells, my parents, I suppose.
Yeah.
Never quite worked that one out, but they were definitely Cockneys.
Well, I know the story behind that, but I won't bore you with it now. But your life in East London suburbs, which is basically what it was, because everybody moved out, Dagenham, Harold Hill, etc.
What a magnificent place that was to grow up in.
It
was so clean and tidy. You had everything there.
Not like that now, mate.
And you were a couple of bus rides from London.
Yeah, absolutely. But how did you get into the music industry, and what did you do when you first started?
Oh, well, I liked school, but I've got an older brother, 4 years older than me. We didn't get on. And he's exactly 4 years old. So when I went into junior school, he went into grammar school. And I had it rammed down my throat just how good my brother was for 4 years, which did him no favours, did me no favours. So when it come to taking the 11 plus and going on for grammar school, if you didn't want to take it, you would take the morning off. So I took the morning off. Right. I don't remember having a conversation with my parents about it. I don't think they were particularly bothered. But I just went on to secondary mod, an incredible school, Qualls. Headmaster was George Laws at the time, an incredible character. And I quite enjoyed it, but I wanted to get away from home. So at the age of 15 and a half, I signed up for 9 years in the Junior Leaders Regiment of the Royal Corps of Transport. And within about 3 months, I was on a train coming home. The military definitely was not for me at that stage. I was definitely not for the military at that stage. And actually, that was an alternative. I did think about that when I was joining the old bill. I thought I might go back in the army, but I found out I was too old because I was 26 when I joined the police. Right. But the Royal Marines would have had me. Can you imagine me in the Royal Marines?
In a way.
No, I wouldn't have got in anyway, but I didn't apply. And where was I? School, yeah. So I joined the army, and I had a couple of nasty accidents in there on the assault course because we were issued World War II kit and National Service kit. So we had studded boots, right, proper hobnails, and you had two pair, one which you kept as best and balled up, and the others were your working boots. And they both took about 4 years to break in. And I was on, we were on an assault course and running along about 12 foot off ground on wet boards, like scaffold boards, and fell off. And that's where my knee problem came in. So I was shipped off home. And on the way home, with me little, I've still got all the paperwork for the military. Still got my pass to get a warrant to get on a train to come home. Somebody had left as we were leaving Liverpool Street Station to get back to Harold Wood to get home. Somebody had left the Evening Standard or the Evening News on the train, and I picked it up because I had no idea what I was going to do, mate. I was told the idea was going to the military. It's a career for at least 9 years of your life. They carry on your education and take you as far as you go. You know, if you were university standards, they take you there. And by the time you were eligible to 18 to get into the men's service, the regular service, you know, you would be thoroughly indoctrinated and on your way to being a warrant officer or whatever. But that didn't work. And so I guessed school wouldn't have me back. And I picked up Evening Standard and looked in there. And there was a job for a shop in Tottenham Court Road called F R Walsh. And it was a sheet music shop, and they wanted what they called a runner. And when I got off the train, I phoned them up and they said, "Can you start Monday?" And I did, right? So I go to this shop. My job in Tottenham Court Road was to take a holiday type travel case, bloody great big thing, as big as I was, empty, with a list of sheet music, and literally just down the road is Soho, Denmark Street, Oxford Circus, Bond Street, where all the music publishers were, Greek Street. And I would go around to the music publishers, walk in, go to the trade desk, say, right, I want 20 copies of this, 20 copies of that. They put it in me, or I put it in my case, and I'd carry this bloody thing around, because by the time it's full up, it weighed a ton. And Frank Walsh was the boss. He was such a miserable geezer. I had to do it on foot, hence the reason they called me a runner and not a taxi passenger or a bus passenger or a train passenger. And the only other guy working in there was a fella called Tom. Can't remember his surname, but he was a retired trumpeter. And he played, he said, with everybody. And he loved talking about it, but his lip had gone, his top lip. He'd lost the embouchure. He couldn't play a trumpet anymore. And he said to me, Ian, he said, "You don't want to do this job, mate." He said, get out. I said, "What are we going to do?" He said, "Go round to, next time you're in Carlin Music, which is at 17 Savile Row," he said, "see Ernie. You can't miss him. He's only got one arm. And tell him I sent you, because they're looking for somebody to work on the counter." So I went round there, and Ernie said, "Can you start Monday?" So I said, "Yeah." And so I just disappeared from F R Walsh. They didn't see the going of me. And I was doing the reverse. So I'm now behind the counter, in the warm, with a proper lunch break. Don't have to run around. But the beauty of it was 17 Savile Row was a Georgian building, and it's got a blue plaque out the side for an architect. Just trying to think of his name. George Basevi.
Right.
An architect, Georgian architect. He actually designed Belgrave Square in London. Right. So this guy knew what he was doing, but it should have another blue plaque on it, because everybody who was in the building knew, and I've actually seen it on the internet somewhere, that Jimi Hendrix, Noel Redding and Mitch Mitchell had their first jam together.
Well, I never.
In that building, in the loft office, because this place is about 5 stories high, and there's no lift. So they had to hump all their guitars and everything up the stairs. Probably didn't have roadies in those days. And they jammed in this tiny little office right up the top of the building. And that's the rumour. That's the story I heard from people who worked there for years. And of course, ex-Animals bass guitarist, whose name escapes me at the moment, he was their manager.
Eric Burden.
No, he was the singer.
Chas Chandler.
That's it, Chas Chandler. And John Still, who's a drummer.
Yeah,
they had their own agency.
Mitch Slade as well, and died in a plane crash.
That's right. Yeah. And he was big man. Big man was Chandler. But anyway, apart from that, but what a place to work, because it had several floors. And as you walked up, I was right in the basement. Out the back of the basement, we had 3 songwriters called Arnold, Martin and Morrow, who were very good friends with a young man called David Essex. And David was in and out because they could write songs, but they wanted a decent singer to sing their songs.
They were going to make him a star.
Yeah, exactly. No pun intended. And he was in there quite often. And these songwriters work 9 to 5 Monday to Friday, take an hour off for lunch, just churn. It's like the Brill Building in New York, wherever it is. And I used to walk up to the railways, up to Oxford Circus Tube Station with David, and we'd have a chat. And he wore this most amazing aftershave. I'm looking for it. I've got it somewhere. You can still get it, called Aqua de Selva.
Right.
And I said, what's that aftershave you wear? It's Aqua de Selva. Went out and got me some of that. And it was only a few years ago. I thought, I wonder if they still do it. And lo and behold, they do. Smells a bit different, but that's probably the age of my nose. And walked up to the station with him. He was telling me about his girlfriend, who was an Italian shoe heiress. And this was before he was famous, before he did, was it Jason and the Coat of Many Colours or something?
I don't know. I mean, he did. That'll Be the Day, and then he did Stardust.
Right. Godspell on stage.
Godspell. He did do
Godspell on stage, and that passed me by. But then, because I saw him on Stardust and things like that, Top of the Pops, and I kid you not, about 5 years ago, something just popped up in my brain. I was talking to somebody about David Essex, telling him, swing that lamp, young man, telling him this story. And it just occurred to me, I wonder if he's still around. And I found a website and he's got an email for him. So I thought I'd give it a go. And I sent him God's honest truth, I sent him an email saying, hello, you probably won't remember me, but do you remember Arnold, Martin and Morrow, 17 Savile Row, you popping in and out? Me and you used to walk up to the station at night. You wore Aqua de Selva aftershave. You were going out with beautiful lady, because I met her a couple of times, Italian shoe heiress, and blah, blah, blah. And so you've done well, mate. Good boy. I said, had an interesting life myself. After the music industry, I was in the police, etc., blah, 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 waffling away. And you know, I got a reply. I actually got a reply from David. And do you know what? He had no idea who I was. Absolutely none. He said, I remember Arnold, Martin and Morrow. He said, I remember 17 Savile Row, playing music. He said, but I'm sorry, mate. He said, I don't remember you at all.
That's hilarious. He lives out this way. He lives at Wickham Bishops now, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
And but as I say, songwriters in there. There was Arnold, Martin and Morrow out the back. There was Clive Westlake, an Irish Welshman. And he was very good friends with who wrote MacArthur Park?
Oh, Webb? Was it Webb that wrote the MacArthur?
Yeah, I'm sure it was Webb.
Webb wrote Wichita Lineman, stuff like that.
Yeah, he's very good friends with him. He was in and out all the time.
Right. So
I met him. Clive wrote some lovely, lovely songs. And one of my jobs, I'm sort of jack of many trades, was copying their reel-to-reel tapes, because there were no cassettes in those days. So what you would do was you wouldn't send a reel-to-reel tape because they're magnetic; they can get wiped. So you had demo discs, which were basically black acetate on an aluminium disc.
Oh, right.
And you had this thing that looked like an old-fashioned record player. Well, we had one. You put a reel-to-reel tape on, this thing was linked up to it. And you would drop the needle, and it would actually cut the grooves while the song's playing on the tape. And then you got something solid, virtually indestructible, highly inflammable, mind you, but virtually indestructible. And Clive wrote one of my favourite songs that Clive wrote was a thing called "How the Web Was Woven." Nobody's ever heard of it, but Elvis did release it on an LP, and he also performed it at Las Vegas when he was doing his Las Vegas things. Now Elvis heard that song through a 7-inch demo disc that had gone through my hands.
There you go.
My fingerprints were on it. So I posted that off to the Colonel, and he listened to it, and obviously, whatever, I'm guessing, played it to Elvis, and I recorded it. And we had another couple of songwriters called Guy Fletcher and Doug Flett. Every year they were putting in about a dozen songs for Eurovision, and they had some good hits with Cliff and the Shadows and all the middle of the road. Because that's basically what we were. We were churning out middle of the road songs, and anything that we published that was released on record, we used to promote, even if it was on the B side, because if somebody's buying the A side, they pay mechanical copyrights for that and PRS, but they also pay for the B side. So we would pressure as much as we can to get it played on top of the pops and the radio and stuff. And Fletcher and Flett they were just churning them out left, right, and centre. I was thinking that one of their songs was "Power to All Our Friends" by Cliff, but when I looked it up just before we started, that was written by somebody else. But they did have a couple of Eurovision songs. And I was walking up downstairs, you'd hear these songs start off. You just hear like a chord run through, because these songwriters had a little office, tiny little cupboard with a piano in it, ashtray, and that was about it. Oh, a chair. And they'd lock themselves or just shut the door, sitting there. I'll be up and down the stairs all day, hearing these songs being written. I can remember hearing songs that Dusty Springfield recorded that were written by Clive Westlake. And the Shadows and Cliff had their office just in the rooms above me on the ground floor. So they were in and out all the time, and I was cutting discs for them. So got to know them. Hank Marvin, big hero of mine, me being a guitar player, big hero of mine. We weren't on each other's Christmas card lists. And again, if I sent him an email, he probably wouldn't know who I was. But he would come down while I was copying he'd come down with a tape. "Can you copy this for me?" Yeah. And I'd do the disc. And he reminded me of Eric Morecambe. His wit, his humour was so quick.
Really?
And brilliant comedian. And of course, I mean, he influenced everybody, that guy.
Oh yeah, he did. I think he lives in Australia.
Cliff was going out with the Australian lady singer who died recently, bless her heart. It was in Greece. Olivia. Yeah, Olivia Elton-John, as Eric Morecambe called her.
Oh yeah.
So she was in and out. Dusty, Lulu, so many people in and out. And being at 17, Savile Row. At number 3 Savile Row, does that ring a bell?
Yeah.
The Beatles office, Apple.
Yeah.
They had better disc cutters than we did, so I was in and out of there all the time. And at that time, I had long straight hair and used to wear John Lennon sunglasses, and quite often wore a white suit or something, flared. And the girls were out the front all the time. There's a constant gathering of girls. I don't know how they managed to get off school all the time. And I would quite often have to suffer. "Oh, look, it's John, and go rushing in through the door, only to fall over the threshold like an idiot once. And but in their basement they had studios, and they had disc cutters that cut hot, so it's better quality.
Right.
But I was there on January 69. I was in my office and what the hell is that noise out there? Lifted up the window. I was working up in the attic office at that time, and looked out. There was a load of people looking up at the roof at Apple. And they were doing a rooftop performance.
Final throws.
Yeah, and we could get out on our roof, and we got a really good view from where we were. And I kid you not, I have studied every inch of footage of that, and I can't see me on there at all. And they put out the Let It Be documentary and the videos of the recording of the last albums and arguments and things. And then they showed the full performance, because there's the four of them with Billy, somebody playing keyboards, American.
Yeah, he went on to Billy Preston. Was it Billy Preston?
Yeah.
He went on to play on the Black and Blue album with the Rolling Stones in '74.
Yeah, I mean, he was a man in his own right.
He was, but he was a brilliant keyboard player.
Yeah, absolutely, and songwriter.
Yeah.
So I saw that. One of a few, and a couple of hundred people actually there seeing that.
I love talking because I am into music history, so it just and looking at a tangible. I don't buy records now. I don't buy CDs.
You don't need to now, do you?
No, we don't. But having that tangible product, that's where we would learn the lyrics of the songs. And you'd play the same record. The first record that I ever got was In the Summertime by Mungo Jerry.
Wow.
That was, and I was
young.
But I was 5.
Yeah.
But I knew it because my mum and dad were into music, and that's how it was, And when we had a radio, a little record player, and it had a single spindle, and you stack all your records on, and they dropped that. You wouldn't do that because they'd scratch them, but it would automatically drop it.
Was it a down set?
I couldn't tell you, but I mean, it's just. But that's what it was.
Well, my mum was a classically trained pianist when she was a child, so we had a piano in the house.
Right.
And I used to sit and listen to my mum play, and she could read music fluently, and put a lot of it to memory. And so I learned all the classics before I even went to school. The first record that was bought for me for my, I think it was about 10th birthday, I wanted a copy of Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor.
As you do.
Played by Dr. Albert Schweitzer, who was a missionary, but for some unknown reason, that record got played a lot on Junior Favourites on a Saturday morning. Junior Favourites, I think it was called. And along with the records by Tommy Steele and Pinky and Perky and all that. And Mum said, "What do you want for your birthday?" I said, "I'd really love a record of E-Power, Dr. Albert Schweitzer playing Bach's Toccata and Fugue." So we went round to our little music shop in Harold Hill called Record Chest. Needless to say, they didn't have that. Went through his catalogue, couldn't find it, but he ordered me an EP of that and Bach's Little Fugue, played by somebody called E-Power Biggs, who I'd never heard of and never really knew much about until, dare I mention the fact that I was a Freemason and I was at a Masons meeting, and I always made a point of befriending the organist because they do so much work at Masonic meetings, And I was chatting to this guy, and in this particular lodge, they had a lovely instrument. And chatting to him before the meal, and he said he gave lessons. Well, I started off with the keyboards, but through coincidence of a teacher at school at the age of about 14, 15, giving me an LP, long playing record, to review over the school summer holidays. But it just happened to be John Mayall's Blues Breakers, who I'd never heard of. And everything is the last minute, and it was back then. So about 2 days before due to go back to school after the summer holidays, I reviewed this thing. And I mean, the first couple of seconds, that was it. The piano lid was down, and I was borrowing a guitar off my uncle. So I always thought of taking up the keyboards again. I said, "Do you give lessons?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Can you give us a little bit of the old Little Few by Bach?" And I said, "I've got that on record." Told him the story as usual. 10 years old, that's right. And it's by somebody called E. Power Biggs. And I said, "I've never heard of him or her, never seen anything by them." And this is pre the internet.
Yeah.
Talking, so there's no way of looking it up. And he said, "Oh, Edwin Power Biggs. Yes, he taught me to play organ."
I didn't know.
Yeah. So I found out who Edwin Power Biggs was. But the first record I bought, yours was, say again, in the summertime.
In the summertime, Mungo Jerry.
Yeah. My one was House of Rising Sun.
Oh, was it?
The Animals.
Was that 60?
And still got it. I've got a collection of about 200 or 300. I haven't counted them. Long playing records. And singles, and quite a lot of in the music industry, before anything is sold, sent out to the shops, they create test pressings, which you call either white labels or pink labels, depending on the colour of the label. There's nothing on it at all, except for a little matrix mark. And I've got a load of those, which might be worth a few bob one day. Unfortunately, none by the Beatles, as turned up in the Red Cross, I think it was, charity shop in Woodbridge in Suffolk. Somebody brought a load of LPs in. It turned out to be a couple of test pressings of the Beatles, which went for a small fortune.
Yeah, I'll bet.
But you say about the lyrics, I mean, you used to get gatefold albums with the pull-out lyrics, or the lyrics printed inside. You had all the producer and the arranger and the musicians and everything, all the information on there you liked. When I worked for Decca Records, we were one of the few companies that had our own art department. And in the basement was the all the art department, all the artwork for albums, sleeves, going right back to the wartime. And I used to go down there and just rifle through them. And because they messed up by passing on the Beatles. And that guy wasn't working there. I think he'd probably gone off, and because Decca were offered the Beatles and they turned them down, said they weren't professional enough or something. This bloke was, his little office, he used to sit in his office, apparently, I was told, and people would walk past his office and shout out, "Wanker!" every time they went past. But there was all this artwork down there, and the Rolling Stones, their first 4 or 5 albums, The Animals, Moody Blues, and therefore the latter version of Moody Blues, the two guys themselves, Justin Lodge and John Lodge and Justin Hayward, whatever. All that artwork's there. Very tempted.
I bet.
And frame it and put it up on the wall. But no, you can't, because you're not going to, how can you ever, especially the Rolling Stones, the original artwork. Apart from that, it was a crap place to work. It was dreadful. It really was like, old Mr. Grace would come round and tell us we've all done very well, Sir Edward Lewis. He used to arrive in his Rolls Royce in the morning, and he'd sit in the car until the commissionaire come out in full uniform, open the door and chucked him one up. And then he'd get out and go into the office. The lift would be held open for him and he'd go straight up, and he had about 3 secretaries. Not an interesting place to work, really. I spent 4 years trying to get out there and ended up in the old bill.
But you're talking about a time where people like Don Arden were running riot. He was a proper Svengali, wasn't he? And who's obviously the father of Sharon Osbourne. Yeah. And bands got royally ripped off by these record companies and by their agents.
Absolutely. And I mean, I worked for one of my bosses when I was at Colin Music was Dave Most, Mickey Most's brother.
Right.
And Dave and Clive Westlake used to write songs together. And Dave Most was originally a Hoover salesman till his brother Mickey Most made it, and then he brought him into the music industry. Now they were Svengalis, they really were. I mean, Mickey Most produced Jeff Beck's Truth album, which was Rod Stewart, Ronnie Wood, Nicky Hopkins, Mick Waller on drums, and Jeff Beck, obviously, which is an absolute classic album. And then the one following that, can't remember what it was called. Oh, Beckola.
Right.
And Mickey was not fond of paying people their dues, their session fees. And I was sat in my office one day, my phone rings, and a receptionist said, "Is Dave Most about?" So I said, "Well, he's gone out. He'd be back in about 20 minutes. Why?" "There's a couple of guys here who say that he owes them money," which was a regular occurrence. So you might have to edit this one, take the names out legally. And these two guys come up, and it both off their heads. Had left his Lamborghini parked on double yellow lines outside our office and was shouting out the window at a meter maid down there. And they hassled Dave and got their money. Went off that day. Never saw him again until I saw him on stage. What
a band! Yeah.
But as you say, it was, when I started, it was a fabulous industry to be in if you could get in it and if you could stay in it.
Oh,
because the competition for talent, lack of talent, or even just being on the professional side as I was. I mean, I play guitar, but I spent most of my time in London working. I worked for a company called Youngblood Records for 4 or 5 years, which is run by an ex-60s pop star, lovely bloke, absolutely lovely bloke, Mickey Dallon. He had a few hits back then, and he was part of the oh God, what's the name of that producer who got murdered? Very famed for his reverb. Everything was recorded in his bathroom. And there was a play written about John Alton killed him, his boyfriend or something. Mickey Dallon did do a lot of recordings for this guy. With Mickey Dallon, one of his main partner was a Swedish guy called Jan Olofsson, who had his own record label called Birth. Mickey's record label was called Youngblood. And we all had complimentary membership of La Valbonne Club in Kingsley Street off of Carnaby Street.
Right.
And we would go in there, and there would be like Michael Caine would be over in one corner and Orson Welles in another. I mean, it was that sort of place.
Fabulous.
And you either drank Bacardi and Coke in those days, or champagne. That was in La Val, but there was a pool, a swimming pool, actually on the dance floor, just to the right of the dance floor. And you had professional disco type people in there dancing away. And we had a bit of a reception in there for a friend of Yang's. And I remember waking up in the office the following morning with a stinking hangover. And I said, that mate of yours, what a cracker. I said, who was he? Because I couldn't remember. And he said, oh, he's Carl Gustaf. So I said, oh, who does he work for then? He said, well, he's the Crown Prince of Sweden. So I've been out drinking all night with the Crown Prince of Sweden. I had no idea at all. And he didn't have any bodyguards or anything. He did have 3 women with him. But by the time I was looking at getting married for the first time and changing jobs, way of life, settling down, etc., which I've never regretted. The music industry had changed. Punk was in, hated punk, still do. It was fabricated completely. Small record labels were popping up all over the place. And they've mostly been bought out by big Japanese concerns now.
Oh,
and
yeah.
it was changing so much, you know, and even I actually, thinking about it, I had my own record label, put out one record, lost all my money and got screwed by Island Records, who were our distributors, and lost a lot of money. That is it. That was the end for me, because I put a lot of money into that. And so, as I say, there's me sat in front of the chief, rattling away everything I'd done, all the people I'd met, and said to him, I suppose I taught myself out a job. No, not at all, you're in. So I did 25 years.
So where did you go when you first, you've done Ashford?
No.
You went to
Eynsham. 21st of May, 1979, I walked in through the front doors of training school.
So who did you meet first at training school then?
Peter Knight.
Peter Knight.
He was the one I walked into. He stood there. Peter Knight, really handsome guy, tiny little pencil moustache.
You're a donkey's dick.
Sorry?
Used to shout at people, you're a donkey's dick.
That's right.
Yeah.
He nicknamed me Clint Eastwood because the first time I put a uniform on and we went into class, everybody's got their sleeves down, but I always wore my sleeves at 3/4 or a quarter, you know. And he shouted out at me down the corridor, "Who the fuck do you think you are, Clint Eastwood?" And that was it. I was nicknamed Clint after that. He terrified us.
Yeah, he did.
Absolutely terrified us. But when we came back from Eynsham, as the locals called it, Eynsham Hall, which is a hotel now, and I must go back there sometime to stay there. He was great. From then on, he was great. And he did come down and visit us with his inspector, Halton. We nicknamed Inspector Halton Muppet because we thought he looked like Stettler and Waldorf out the Muppets. Everyone's got to have a nickname, mate, haven't they?
They have.
And Eynsham Hall was quite a drudge for me. I didn't enjoy it that much at all. But when I left there, I was really quite sad. And I changed a great deal. I was fit for one thing. Lost a lot of weight, was fit, exercised my brain. And the other thing is, because when you're signing up, when you fill in the application form in those days, the last thing at the back was, in this space, please name 3 police stations within the Essex Police District that you would like to be posted to. So I wrote all the way across it, across all 3, anywhere but Brentwood. And I had very good reasons for not wanting to go to Brentwood. And basically, I sort of grew up there when I wasn't at work in London. And I knew all the villains and all the druggies and all.
Yeah, of course.
And where did I get posted? Of course, Brentwood.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
The Plaza.
Brentwood. And yeah, I spent my probation at Brentwood. Neil Butcher was the chief inspector there, lovely bloke. Brian Boone was the inspector.
Oh, yeah.
My sergeant was Ray French. Brian Sams was an absolute legend, that man. He was the neighbourhood beat officer's sergeant. Ken Drain was a station sergeant. He reminded me so much of Dixon the Dock Green. And on my shift, the first day there, my very first shift, early turn, sat in the front office is a fella called Paul Kelly, PC Paul Kelly. I actually went to school with him, had no idea he was in the police. So I had a friend on shift immediately. That was nice. And I was teamed up on the first day out in a vehicle, one early turn. Can't remember the guy's name, but he'd been in the Met, he'd been in Australian police, and he'd come back to Essex as a PC. And we got a call down to somewhere in Margaretting. Lady just getting out of the shower, walking downstairs, disturbed, or was disturbed by a young man in her garden looking at her. So we built it down there in the car. And this guy appeared from the front garden. And I looked at him twice. And the PC I was with, whose name will come to me in a minute, he said, "What's up, anything?" So I said, "I don't know, it's just that bloke back there." He said, "Right, we'll go and have a look." Spun the motor around, pulled up alongside this guy, and he's off. He's running across a field full of corn. Me, fresh out of training school, I'm as fit as a bloody fiddle. Harry, that's his first name anyway, Harry, was the PC with me. Harry said, "Go get him, boy." And I ran after him, rugby tackled him, brought him to the ground, and said those words I'd longed to say for so long. "You're fucking nicked, matey."
My old beauty.
Yeah, in my best John Cleese accent. And so my first day at work, I got a prisoner who was an absconder from Hollesley Bay.
Right.
Been on at least 2 days. He was responsible for so many burglaries all the way from Hollesley Bay to Brentwood, and put his hands up to most of them, I think, or quite a lot. He put his hands up to quite a lot anyway. And I got about 4 or 5 hours overtime on my first day. I passed him over to Mick France, DC Mick France.
Yep.
CID at Brentwood at that time were legendary. Yeah, Pat McCarthy.
Yep.
Tom Sanderson, it was DS, 2 DSs, Pat McCarthy and Tom Sanderson. Gary Glassfield, Ernie Carr. And that really was a branch of the Sweeney there. And because I couldn't believe it, first day, overtime.
Never look back.
Statements in, arrest. What more could you want? I think it took me about another 15 years before I nicked another burglar, but it started off well. And one of the things that I'd always thought I wanted to do was go on the dog section. And you do all your attachments. I did an attachment to CID, attachment with the dogs with Tony Spong, I think it was. Yeah, Tony Spong. Attachment to the fingerprint guy, can't remember his name. And in an attachment with Peter Mills, who was the MBO he was resident beat officer. He lived in a police house there at Blackmore.
Blackmore, yeah.
And Peter was like 6.5 feet tall.
Tiny Mills went on and worked in the force control room.
Yeah. And a more gentle man and gentleman you couldn't have wanted. He was not a fighter, I don't think.
We didn't need
the size of him. He was always called on to help out for that sort of thing. And I remember going, while I was attached to him, went to his office in the morning, we got in the car, and he said, "We're going around to see this old boy now, he'd been burgled." 2 guys broke into his little cottage. This guy's in his 80s or 90s. They tied him to a chair, slapped him about, and nicked whatever they could find in there, a little bit of money and stuff. And it was only the Meals on Wheels people or somebody like that came the following day that found him tied up. So we went round there to make sure that this is a couple of days after the offence, and make sure that he was all right, and having a chat with him. And he had some old photographs about, and just for want of something to say, I said, "Oh, that chap in the uniform there," I said, that's quite some medal he's got there. And he said, yes, the Victoria Cross. So I said, oh, well, who's that? He said, that's my granddad.
Wow.
And he said he was actually presented it by Queen Victoria. So I said, and you physically knew your granddad. He was alive when you were alive. So yeah, so you touched your granddad who had touched Queen Victoria.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah. I said, let me shake your hand, please.
Oh.
So close.
Yeah.
So close. And you meet some fabulous people in this job, don't you?
Oh, you do?
What's the most embarrassing thing you've ever done in this job?
Well, I went and got the Kentucky Fried Chicken and got in the wrong car because I thought it was a police car, and I sat next to this bloke, and he went, "What are you doing in here?" And I thought, "Oh shit, that's not." Mate, I've done loads. I've done so many. Yeah, exactly, and some aren't repeatable. I mean, I think about Mick Frost, who's sadly passed away.
Yeah,
he got bored looking after the prisoner that had broken into Bunyard's house.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that? And
yeah.
he broke into Bunyard's house, jumped out the window, broke his ankle. And us probationers used to get the hospital duties because the bloke was in there. And Mick inadvertently wrote his name, carved his name into the chair at the hospital. He just lost total focus of what he should be doing. And the other abiding memory for him was that he got sent to a suspects on premises at Chelmsford swimming pool, and they had an outdoor swimming pool as well. And they'd put the cover on, and he walked onto the cover, and it came up around him. It just engulfed him completely.
Jesus.
Yeah, but yeah, I've done a few that I can't really talk about, to be fair. But but it was. Look, I hope that they're still having fun, but we did have an awful lot of fun.
Actually, embarrassing moments. My abiding one, the first one, which taught me a lot of lessons in one go, was walking Brentwood High Street on my own the first time. Helmet, raincoat, walking up. And there's a car parked outside the bank on double yellow lines, and the driver sat there waiting, presumably for somebody to come out of the bank. And I saw him about 100 yards off. He was still there when I got to him, so I stepped out into the street and, again, putting on my best John Cleese policeman accent. And I didn't quite refer to him as Sterling Moss or anything like that. I said, "You waiting for somebody then?" And he said, "Yeah, he's in the bank." I said, "This is not a car park, you know." And he says, "Yeah, I know." And I said, "Well, will you move on then, or I'll give you a ticket?" And he said, "I can't." So I said, "Why not?" And all he did was, he looked at me and he just went, and it was a left-hand drive. Frakes, look. And the other time was my first sudden death. I'd not done one before, but I was with Basil Thornton, who I was at training school with. Basil said, "Don't worry." He said, "I got all the, we had all the paperwork with us." He said, "I've done one before, nothing to worry about." We walked in, and first thing Basil said was, introduced ourselves, and he said, "Is that the chair that the deceased passed away in?" And the guy in the house said, "Yeah." And it was a next door neighbour had come in on Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve or something. And they were having a discussion. He just passed away. Lovely way to go, in this armchair. And I thought, Basil, I must remember to ask him how he worked that out, because that's just like. So guy said, "Do you want a cup of tea?" He said, "Oh yeah, we'd love a cup of tea, please." And he said, "We'll take a seat." So I went and sat down in the chair that the deceased had passed away in, and found out how Basil knew that this guy. I was soaked with dead man's piss, absolutely, right the way through to the flesh, everything I was wearing. And I thought, do I ride this out? Or
Oh, God.
Anyway, FSU. I've seen them training during one of the probationary courses when I was at headquarters, and they were training in the car park. and I'd excluded CID. I wanted to do something special, and because again, I very rarely do things by halves, and I took a fancy to them. And this really early days. We're talking about 1980, 81 now, and we just had the 50th anniversary of the Pulse Support Unit CFG, which was a wonderful thing to be at. And I decided to apply for them, but I'd only got 18 months in the job. And I went along, did the fitness test, went in for the interview. And I think I was talking to Dougie Adams in the interview. And he said, look, we'd love to have you, but you've only got 18 months in. Go away, put in for a firearms permit assessment. And when you got your time in, and hopefully a firearms permit, come back. So I did. And I got my firearms permit. I went through the firearms assessment, which was an incredible experience because there, Pete Woodcock was one of the instructors. Monty Montgomery, another instructor on there. A guy whose name I can't remember, unfortunately. A couple of others anyway. And you had to do. You were shown how to handle a weapon, and I can't remember if we actually pulled the trigger, made a noise. But it's mainly to do with scenarios and how you react. And I got through that, got a course, got through the course, got a firearms permit. And the only job I was ever deployed at was a hijacking at Stansted Airport, where I sat in the background and did nothing, but was pleased to be there and see how it's all done. And having got over 2 years in now, the FSU advertised again on the old pink forms. Remember them?
Yeah.
And I sat down, wrote my application out, and sent it through Inspector Brian Boone, and he came to me and said, Ian, do you really want to go for the FSU? And I said, yes, Gov. And he said, look, we're having a shake around here. We're opening the Hutton office, which had been closed for a long time. He said, Brian Sams and the MBOs are going down there, but we want 4 uniformed guys who can work on their own to work shifts 24/7. And if you just want to get out of Brentwood Nick, they say, I'll give you that job now. You won't have any competition. You won't have to go through anything. Job's yours if you want it. Or Kelvedon Detached Beat. That's coming up available. And I quite fancied a detached beat myself, but the ex-Mrs. Frakes didn't like the idea. And we were living down the Platted Road at the time in a job house. And he said, if you give me 12, 18 months at one of those jobs, he said, I'll put this application form and a letter with it in your personal file. And then if you want to go for it next time they advertise, he said, no problems. He said, wherever I am, come to me. If I get posted, come to me. He said, no, I'll put it through. So I went and worked with Brian Sams and the MBOs down at the Hutton office for about 18 months. And as good as his word, next time they advertised, I was in, and he forwarded my application saying, this guy's applied 18 months ago, but we had a chat, and he very kindly gave me 18 months of his career to help establish the Hutton office. And Tick VG and all that got in, which is just as well because I needed that letter several years later when somebody was making accusations against me as to the only reason that I was on the FSU was that Brentwood didn't want me. and let me go very easily.
Nice.
Fortunately, very fortunate, I had that to fall back on and turn this bloke's words inside out for him. But that's another story. So I got on the unit, and I've been on a minor strike as part of the Greys division while I was at Brentwood. I was on the first 2 weeks up there. First 2 weeks that we were deployed, I went up there, and we stayed at, this is from Brentwood, not the unit. And my skipper at that time was Paul Grover.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Everybody knows Paul Grover. They know what we're laughing about because he's a lovely bloke. Yeah. Really, and what an intelligent man. I mean, and it turns out we were sent up there and we stayed at a military camp. I can't remember the name of it, but it was the Intelligence Corps.
Right.
And he was an ex-squaddy with the Army Intelligence. Yeah, he was a sergeant with them. So, and he still knew a couple of guys there. And we were billeted in their gymnasium. And when we got in there, there were as many camp beds with sleeping bags on as you can imagine would get into a full-size military gymnasium. Each bed had a chair next to it to put your uniform on and your bits and bobs under your bed. And we were there for 2 weeks. The disgusting problem was that we were working nights and the people that had worked the day shift were sleeping in our sleeping bags.
Nice.
So you were getting into warm, stinky feet, sleeping bags. And needless to say, this gymnasium couldn't, there were people permanently asleep in there. And I think there were about 6 toilets and about 6 wash basins and 6 showers, and that was it. Overhead, they had these bloody great big extractor fans. And after about 3 or 4 days, it was unbearable.
I bet.
The heat in there, the smell. So somebody turned the fans on. And this cloud lifted off the floor. And it was dust and fag ash and follicles of skin, body hair, toenails, God knows what else, just lifted up. Somebody shouted out, "Turn the fans off, turn them off." And he turned, and it all come down again. Oh, it's gross. We stayed there for a week, and then they moved us to RAF Scampton, where we were put in classrooms. Still on night shift, we came home to this classroom, this billet, beds in there, climbed into bed. No sooner we got into bed, these jets were warming up about 100 yards from us, going off on their training sorties, so we didn't get any sleep there. Minor strike was interesting, lovely time, really. I wasn't at Allgrave, the unit was. And my experience of being up north was really quite interesting. Pete Mole, you did an interview with Peter. I travelled up with him, sat next to him, and he was reading the books that he was talking about with your last interview. Yeah. I got quite interested in that, had a look at these books. And if I remember rightly, he did actually do some sort of mind control hypnosis thing. It wasn't, it's not party trick, it's therapy. And we were at what's the name of the military? I Survived, whatever it was the T-shirt. But they filmed Michael Caine's wartime football film there, didn't they?
Escape to Victory.
Who?
Escape to
Victory, yeah.
Oh, it's got I know the name of the barracks.
There's probably people shouting at us now the name.
Yeah.
But that was an interesting place because it had these pot-bellied bottom. Peter Mole was the expert at firing one of these up, and I've got vivid memories of one of these glowing orange in our room. I think there was 3, and when we first went, I thought, oh yeah, I'll get next to that because it was winter, and these huts were mothballed from World War II, no doubt, or Korea. And the closer you were, the more unbearable it was. we used to commandeer bread and stuff from the canteen, and yeah, it's great. Pete Mull, we had go out in the van at Christmas. I can remember Christmas time. We were playing cassette tapes over the PA system on the van for the striking miners, and singing along with them to It's Christmas, Slade, and all the other Christmas songs that come up every year. And yeah, it was a terrible time for them.
Oh yeah.
And strangely enough, comedian on TV who's the main guy in the royal family or the Royals.
Ricky.
Yeah, him.
Listen. Yeah.
Yeah. He did a documentary on the demise of the coal industry.
Yeah.
And made it look so romantic, or tried to make it look so romantic. Well, I've been down a pit. We had the opportunities of going down a pit. And it was bloody dreadful, mate. Bloody dreadful.
Far from a
road. You got to the coal face was to jump on the conveyor belt and jump off at the other end. It didn't stop for you. And no, that wasn't a comfortable experience at all. I'm not claustrophobic, but he was talking to people and saying, "Oh, isn't it a shame all this is closed down and you can't do that anymore?" Well, I don't know.
Rose tinted glasses. So
yeah.
The and it was lucrative as well, wasn't it? And Arthur Scargill said that once Thatcher had finished with the miners, the Conservative Party would start on the police, and years to come, he wasn't far wrong. But
well, it was Tony Blair, wasn't it? After he'd got in, they got rid of Maggie. The man in grey coming after her, he immediately lost an election, and Tony Blair came in and immediately pronounced we're going to have 3 years of 15% cutbacks on all the emergency services, and I think the military as well. So we lost an enormous chunk in 3 years of our budget, which has just kept going down. And I'm surprised the police today don't have to pay to actually go to work.
I think some almost.
It's dreadful.
Yeah, it is dreadful.
Yeah. So, I loved my time in the job. I really did. I went out on a medical, and I still keep in touch with as many people as I can, and did a lot of work for a couple of guys who were really struggling, who are now passed on. And you get to trust these. But when I was on the unit, I can remember taking prisoners into Colchester one night, and this is when I was on the unit. A van load of us were doing divisional support to Colchester. Actually, I think that was the night I next nicked my burglars. Took 2 prisoners in, and I was doing the paperwork with them. The van went off for a drive round. Eventually, I'm back in the van, and I can remember asking to stop off at McDonald's in the High Street about midnight. In the van. So we pulled up, and anybody want anything? No, we'd all eaten. So I hadn't eaten. I went to get myself a Big Mac or something, and I noticed a reflection in the window as I got out of the van. 2 other guys got out with me. Didn't ask them to, but they got out. One of them come with me and stood at the door of McDonald's, which was just as well. And the other one stood by the front of the van, just watching your back all the time. It's you train and you work with these blokes, and we partied hard. There was always a barbecue going on somewhere, and holidaying together. And
what year did you come off the unit?
I was there. I think I was there for about 10 years on the unit, and I'd gone from being FSU to TFG and a rifleman as well, and all the other wonderful courses that you get. I had a course, photographer's course. They gave me a camera, which I instantly broke. Various driving courses for driving armoured Land Rover. Surveillance courses, and God knows what else. And it was a great time. Eventually, I was just sort of, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and they brought in tenure.
Yeah, they did.
Never got my head around that. I got a commendation while I was on the unit. It's the only commendation I got. We come out of Southend football ground, just went out of the roof of a block of flats just by the old Southend football ground, and went running around there, and this flat was well on fire. And me and, oh God, I can't remember his name, another PC on the unit at the time, we actually climbed up outside onto the balcony. This guy was on the 3rd or 4th floor, and he was on the balcony trapped. It was his flat that was on fire.
Christ.
And you see the flames pouring out of his doors onto the thing there, onto the balcony. We climbed up. He ended down his budgie in the cage. Passed that down, got him down, got a commendation for that. Quite proud of that. And Chief Constable Burrows.
Yeah. Nice man.
Yeah. I nicknamed him Johnny Morris. He reminded me so much of Johnny Morris.
Yeah, he's still around. He still lives out this way. He's in his 90s now. Yeah.
Lovely bloke. We invited him to an FSU do one night, and he ended up giving a speech on something out of Shakespeare and filling up the gap with our mortal dead or something. And but I don't think he actually joined in the Pass the Port that night. I remember that.
I'm sure.
You ever play Pass the Port?
Yes, I have. Not my favourite hobby. He famously went on the television with Ali G, didn't he?
Yeah.
To talk about, was it about the hunt or something like that?
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. Were you on the unit when the divers died?
Yes.
I mean,
I was on duty that day. That was horrific, heartbreaking, dreadful. There were so many of us wanting to do so much that day. Everybody stayed on duty. Everybody wanted to get involved, and just sat around the office, just total shock.
Taylor and Morris.
Andy
Morrison and Steve Taylor.
Yeah.
Was it
and they were
June 89?
I'll take your word for that.
Must be around then.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a day never to be forgotten. And the funeral as well.
I was on duty. I was in uniform on duty, lining on the Guard of Honour. Yeah,
that's where I was, and we were called to attention, and the two coffins were brought up together, and they were linked.
That's right.
With a rope, bloody line. That did it for me. I was gone, blubbing. Dreadful.
Time, yeah. And of course,
you see it on the news, don't you? Everybody who's dies or is killed, and somebody says, they're really nice man or really nice woman or whatever, full of life, love their family and all that. And these guys really did.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was such a shame, but the job, I mean, that we put on that day, and it went from being very morose. It was I don't actually remember getting inside. I think I was outside. It was so packed.
It was.
And then we all ended up in the Elmer Arms, I think, later on that day in just by the prison up at headquarters. And never to be forgotten, those two, along with others, many others. But
were you on duty when Bill got shot?
I was on duty. I had been in Operation Solo. That was armed robbery. Been doing banks all over the place on a motorcycle and that, and he did a couple of banks, or at least one in Brentwood, and he was a parishioner of Hutton.
Right.
And when the old Bill went round there, they found weapons stuffed up the chimney and all that. But he did have, I think he had a shotgun or firearms license that had been issued by one of the MBOs. There was nothing to actually ban him from that. But I didn't know Bill that well. I wasn't on the unit, but he was an instructor and he did train me. And one of the things that Bill brought home, you get a desire to do the firearms, the full firearms bit. And they always say, you can teach a monkey to shoot. Is the tactics, the side of things, how you confront your man or your woman, and how you work with other guys. And the two main guys in any firearms, the raid team, R1 and R2, up the front. And I certainly knew I'd never make raid. Wasn't that quick-witted, really, and not a responsibility I was keen to take on. But I did make the best S1 that I possibly could, and I really enjoyed that role behind the two raid men. And I remember going training when I was on division, going a qualification day with Bill and again, another name forgotten now, Wolfie, Brian Wolf.
Yes.
And at least I think it was him. But there was only three of us, three divisional blokes on this day, so the quali was over and done with very quickly. And we sat down at lunchtime, and Bill said, just as a side thought, you put yourself forward for all this. Have you ever thought what would happen if you had to do the deed? And what would happen? And what you would go through, and what you would think to yourself? To be quite honest, I hadn't.
No.
And that was just an eye-opener, And but that happened. I was at Brentwood at the time. And I was on duty that day, and also the day that it was announced that Bill had passed and the teleprint to come round.
Was that 27th of August 1984, I think he actually passed.
If you say so.
It was around that time.
Yeah.
Well, because my uncle was on the unit and he went to the Castle Pub, which is another famous FSU event where Frank shot Paul Howe.
Yeah, that was that's out at Harwich Way.
The siege out there. And he shot at Kevin, and Frank Ruggles. Kevin wasn't quick enough, and Frank Ruggles shot Paul Howe. But Frank's sadly passed away now. But it's.
We did at one stage. We did a lot of armed security for people and close protection and things. We were trained for all that. And Octavian, which was the
IRA. Yeah.
After the bombing, which apparently was all planned at the Palace Hotel, Southend. They found a lot of evidence there, and during the IRA campaign, I met a policeman who was ex-army. On his own, did a stop check, and turned out it was IRA. They were armed, and I think they actually shot him. He survived, if I remember rightly. He survived. He lived in Harlow, and we went round to look after him, sit with him, for several days,
right.
as protection for him. And I remember seeing him on the news being interviewed, him laying in hospital bed, microphone stuffed under his nose, and stupid person, this woman says to him, this reporter says, "And what was going through your mind at the time that you were shot?" To which he immediately responded, "Very nearly a bullet."
Yeah. It's Octavian. I mean, that was different, wasn't it?
That was working 6 days, 6 nights, a week for God knows how many months. And I was probably because of tiredness, I was having terrible bloody nightmares at the time. Really lurid, technicolor, stereophonic nightmares taken from a camera. I don't know, when people dream, I don't know if they dream looking at themselves or through their own eyes. And I can remember sitting at Tony Newton's plot in
Coggeshall.
Little Baddow. No, he went on to Coggeshall after that.
Right.
He was at Little Baddow at the time. And tell you stories about Octavian, which I cannot, not on camera anyway.
No.
But we were, and I was in, I was plotted up in the garage with Spud Edwards, my good mate Spud. And I said, I had this dream the other night. I said, bloody horrendous. And he said, "Oh yeah, what's that?" And we both sat there looking out through this dirty pane of glass at night, across his garden to his house, to Tony Newton's house. And I went through this story because it just stuck with me. A lot of my dreams leave, it sort of fall off the edge of the bookshelf sort of thing.
Yeah.
But this one, I remembered it. And I'm sat there telling Spud. Goes on for about an hour. And when I stopped talking, it's complete and utter silence. And I thought he'd fallen asleep. So I turned to look at him, and he sat there with his jaw on his chest. And he said, "Fritz," he said, "I read a hell of a lot of Stephen King." He said, "You got to write that one down. That's the most horrific story I've ever heard in my life." And he mentioned it to Johnny Manners, who as it happens, I spent another night shift in this same garage with. "Tell us your story." But I used to have these horrendous, probably sheer professional exhaustion.
Yeah.
But
they were interesting times, weren't they? I mean, the other one was the Traveller's site at the Hythe, and where they turned on the surveillance team, and it was just different styles of surveillance then, but it was so active.
And because we had props, didn't we? We had the covert rural guys, whose names we won't mention for obvious reasons, and the raves that were going on at the time.
Yeah,
the only time we had any real distinct problems with raves in Essex, because the unit, our intel was so bloody good, we managed to close most of them down before they ever started, so it never really got off the ground in Essex. But the one that clogged the A12 was actually caused by Kent police, who were they'd actually diverted, managed to get into the telephone system, because people were driving around going to telephone kiosks for a certain time. The phone would ring, they'd pick it up and say, "Right, go on to the next telephone kiosk at wherever," and they led them there. So nobody actually knew where they were going, and there'd be this huge convoy. Well, the A12 was blocked up one night, completely static. And I remember seeing much later on Kent actually confessing on the TV, or Kent's chief at the time, we diverted everything from Kent to Essex. Nice. But we managed to quell those. And the great Colchester poll tax riot.
Oh, yeah.
Of 1990, never forget that. That was an interesting day. I was there. I was with the FSU serial, and Tom Dement was our skipper. and if I remember rightly, and the Clacton section under Timmy Stokes, Sergeant Timmy Stokes at the time. And that was an interesting day. They worked their way down the high street, and we eventually ended up, they put some windows in at the Conservative Club.
They did.
And then we were outside the poll tax office, which is opposite the back entrance to Colchester bus garage.
Yep.
Where there was big brick walls on either side. Well, they were taken down during the day. They took them down brick by brick, and they were throwing them at us. We were up against the wall, literally. And we heard shouts, "Don't throw them at the police because we're eating our own people. Throw them on the roof." They were throwing bricks up on the roof, which were rolling down on us. We had our custodian helmets and leather gloves and little sticks, and that was it. And that was quite interesting for a few hours. And had it not been for the horse section who were there that day, skipper Paul Sheffield. Yeah. I spoke to him later, some time afterwards, and he said he called up the governor, said, the FSU and Clacton are taking quite a pushing around down there. And just a mass of people in front of us, absolute mass. And in the distance off to the right, we could see our support, who were up there static, being told not to do anything. And Paul Sheffield said, "Look, we could gallop through there just to take the weight off the FSU and the Clacton detail." And I believe the answer came back no, but he did it anyway, which did give us a little bit of respite. And we were there for a couple of hours taking that. And eventually they all dwindled off to the park where some MP had turned up to give a speech. And the last nicking was by Timmy Stokes, a guy up the War Memorial just outside the Castle Park. He was brought down and I hustled him into a van. And I remember getting home that evening and saying to my wife, "You never guess what I've done today." She said, "I know what you've done today. I saw you on the news, putting that bloke in the van." And that was a get back to Colchester with a prisoner. And not having had a drink for some time, I went up into the bar, which was open. And there's all these guys sat around having a cheery lunchtime, off duty, not being called back. And I thought, I really don't know what's going on here. It's like literally a riot.
Yeah, it was.
And that court case went on for a long time. That was really interesting. All that.
Crown Court.
Yeah.
Bob Ward.
Yeah, Bob Ward. What a man.
Yeah.
What a guy he was. What a governor. I saw Bob Ward at the last reunion for the FSU. That's not a day older. He used to come out with us on a Friday night in the van.
Yeah, well, when Mel Fester knocked him arse overhead at the training and knocked him out. Was it Mel Fester knocked him out?
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, public order training down at Rye House.
Yeah, if I get any names wrong, I apologise. But
likewise.
And Jeremy Stouffer, Jed Stouffer.
Jed Stouffer, yeah. Jed, you wanker Stouffer.
Yeah.
As he was known.
He got shot at, didn't he?
Air weapon, wasn't it?
No, shotgun. Bloke discharged a shotgun at him at, I want to say, Sturma. They went into a house and he had a ballistic shield and the bloke shot at him. But that's fascinating. So, what year did you leave the FSU?
And I was on shift out there with my skipper was Colin Ludlow, the lovely Kevin Hazel, who sadly passed on. He was probably my bestest mate in the whole wide world at the time when I was working there along with Colin. Anyway, about mid-90s, I go to the airport, and by then, ex-Mrs. Frakes #2, aka etc. Bleep, had left, and I had a divorce to sorry, no, the first missus had left. I was with the second missus, the future ex Mrs. Frakes number 2, a divorce to pay off.
Right.
And at that time, at Stansted Airport, everything was paid for by Stansted Airport Limited.
Yeah.
You work as much overtime as was necessary. So I worked my backside off for 3 or 4 years to pay all that off and got it paid off. And it was a really interesting place to work. You got involved with the El Al flights, high security El Al. And obviously, as I understood it, it was said that the Stansted was a gateway, a sort of semi-agreed gateway for the IRA to come in and out, or the Irish, any one of those contingents to come in and out. And so did a lot of work with SB there, Special Branch. Customs, loved watching them at their work. They were very interesting people. And it was not a village, a town unto itself. It had everything there, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And we were allowed, if you were armed, which I was generally at the airport, and you were on nights, it was agreed that as long as you did it not at the police station and not within sight of the public, you could settle up and have a kip between certain hours, but then you were expected to be back inside the terminal and do what they called, what we refer to as a RAP, a routine armed patrol on foot, and just make sure that this, you know, it's all normal and everything else, which we did. And I can remember one night, my mate Pete Beecham, I was acting sergeant, I put him out on his own. We knew where Pete parked up. And the fire service had an area that they did their training in, and they had dummies that they carried around that were the weight of a grown man, you know?
Yeah.
And they looked bloody awful. We managed to creep up on Pete Beecham with one of these and laid it across the windscreen of the car that he was asleep in. So that when he woke up, that was the first thing he saw, staring down at him. And he was not happy.
No.
We never did get round to wind-ups, did we? Wind-ups that used to go on Division, but we better not talk about those.
We'll have to do a separate section for that.
Yeah, am I going on too long?
No, you're fine, mate. I'm going to wrap it in a minute, though.
Yeah. So from the airport, I did some time at the airport, and as you may well remember, I had a back injury.
Yes.
Basically, it was the same that happened with the support unit. We went off public order training, and I couldn't do the shield run.
Right.
My knee from the military, I couldn't do the shield run. And it was time to think about moving on. Because on the unit, you did a fitness test every year to be on the unit, a fitness test at least once a year, maybe twice, for firearms.
Yeah.
Prove that you're fit enough for that, and also for public order. And then you go down to Rye House or Shoebury Ness early days for public order training. Those are interesting places. And so that's why I left the unit, really. I couldn't keep up anymore. And one of the beauties of the job at that time was the occupational health we had.
Oh, yeah. I don't know.
They sent me for physio. I didn't go to just a physiotherapist. I went to the Essex cricket ground.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, they used to send
me. Guys, brilliant. And, you know, for the people that were working there at the time, I think we had our own 2 GPs as well, didn't we?
Yeah, we had...
or several trips down to Flint House.
Yeah.
Which I still contribute to. And then from there, I went on to... I applied for a Marine unit and ended up on a Marine unit for my last, 7 years in the job. And that was mostly to start off with once you're accepted in-house training. And then after about 12, 18 months, you were sent up to Newcastle for a Coastal Patrol police officers course. Can't remember what it was called. It's for several weeks. On the Tyne, from wherever they did the march from back in the 30s.
Jarrow,
yeah, Jarrow on the Tyne. Northumbrian police or Northumberland police. Northumberland. They had a marine and diving school there, and I was on the marine unit with at that time the divers shift on FSU had been terminated, and the divers that were left, a handful of them were on the marine unit, and I went up with two guys and fell in love with Northumberland, which is where I live now. Yeah, went on the marine unit, which is most people loved us on the marine unit. That was really wonderful. And I took over Marine Watch, crime prevention. Nobody wanted us to go into their clubs, their sailing clubs and things, talking about crime prevention. So Jeff Cousins, who I took over Marine Watch with, he'd been going around doing a history talk, and I eventually ended up taking that on as well. It was so much easier to phone up a club and say, introduce myself, and I tell them I come round and I do a chat on the history of the Essex Police Marine Unit, which by the time I finished studying and researching was a history of marine policing in the UK anyway, which started off with the East India Company.
Oh, okay.
Their docks way back in the 17-something or other. They were the first one to have uniformed preventative police officers or officers, and so they were preventative, and they were mostly recruited from Suffolk sailing families, fishing families, to be outsiders and have no contacts, and worked through the history on that. And then I ended up writing the second part of the history of the Marine Unit. Somebody done the first part, which was from Colchester Borough Police, started on the Colne for policing the oyster heads, and collecting the toll for the gas buoy out at sea. And their little hut was still there in somebody's garden, and I had that published by the History Notes. And then Johnny Barr was on the unit with me at the time, and he was a Royal Yachting Association instructor, and he also did the first aid training for just about everybody, etc. Really nice guy, John. But he upset us all by getting the trips to Northumberland cancelled in favour of in-house RYA training, Royal Yachting Association training, which meant that I was given a heap of certificates, what I could take with me when I was early retired, and I could work on a Walter, which was amazing. So I then spent several years after the Marine Unit working on the ferry from Burnham to Essex Marina. I did the wildlife trips in the back, well, what was around the Crouch.
Nice.
And all the seal watching and things. Yeah, it was great. And then finally, my last working paid job was as range safety officer on a boat called Sentinel for MOD Foulness.
Oh, okay.
That was my last job, and that was the only job in my life I ever got the sack from. I knew the other guy. There was two of us on the boat. Knew the other guy, Roy. He worked out of Burnham Yacht Harbour, and he used to run the fuel pumps on there. And with the ferry and the wildlife trips, I would go across and see Roy and fuel up. So I got to know him. And then I saw Sentinel one day, lovely rib, really fast rib, beautiful looking boat. And it was all marked up. And is that a police boat? And he said, no, it's MOD Foulness, and I'll work on it. Because Roy only worked at weekends in the marina. And he said they're looking for somebody else. I phoned up, I got the job. So I worked full time rather than the seasonal with the seal trips and the ferry.
Right.
Worked full time. But the management, I got on board the boat, and just to accustom myself to what was on there, I went round looking where all the life jackets were, the pyrotechnics, the flares, out launch the lifeboat on the roof. And everything's out of date. And if we were boarded by Coast Guard, because we were a working boat, they could come alongside and board us and check everything. It'd be me and Roy that were going to get punished. And we spent a long time trying to get them to do things. And they were very lackadaisical. And one day I got so angry, I sat on the boat, nothing better to do because we spent most of our time at anchor. And I sent something like a 14-page text to my good lady partner, Angela, at the time, and moaning. I had to get it off my chest.
Oh.
Moaning about the management, how bad they were, and blah, blah, blah. And sent the text to her. And normally she would reply within 5 minutes. 2 hours later, there's no reply. And I think, I wonder why she hasn't replied. And I looked, and I'd sent it to my management.
Oh,
14-page moaning about them to them. So a couple of months later, they eventually come down because their office was in Tenby in Wales. And they said, we'll sort a few things out and we get it up and running for you. But they come down and sacked me. So that was my last job. Yeah, I love it up here. I'm on my own. Bungalow looking out at the castle. Just beyond the castle, there is the sea. 7 miles of glorious deep. When the tide goes out, it goes out a long way.
Lovely.
Eldon Sands. Northumberland, the secret kingdom, as they call it, Northumbria, is the least populated county in the country. So there's a lot of countryside. And it's just beautiful up here. I fell in love with it when I was on the Marine unit on my course. We had to chart a passage up to the Farne Islands, around the Farne Islands from Jarrow, out through the Tyne, through the piers, and up around the Farne Islands, and into a place called Sea Houses that I'd never been to before. I've been, the furthest north I'd ever been was on a miners' strike. And we pulled into Sea Houses, and one of the instructors on the boat, Smoking Bob, he said that Sea Houses was famed for its fish and chip shops, which it still is. And he was going up to get saying, anybody want to come with him? And I did. I went with him, just me and he. And you traverse up this very steep hill, short hill, between the ship public house, the harbour, and the Bamborough Castle Hotel. And I just stopped halfway, turned around and looked out to sea, and it was such a beautiful day. The beaches on the way out there were all deserted and golden. The only thing that was missing were the palm trees. It just looked so spectacular. And I stood there and looked out across the harbour at the Farne Islands, and it was like somebody fired the old love arrow through my heart. And I was tearful on the way home, last day of the course, going home. Thought about transferring, but Trudy didn't want to know. And been permanently homesick for 25 years. Been coming up here on holiday. 1998 it was that I was on the course. And now I'm here. It took me 25 years to get here. Absolutely no regrets. None at all. Got a house full of guitars and amps. I play every day. I just bought myself a Nord keyboard.
Nice.
So I'm teaching myself after all these years to play the piano again. And just slowly making friends around here. And I've been to with other musicians into rehearsal studios. But because everything's so far away up, it doesn't take you long to get there because the roads are clear. And, you can do a 100-mile round trip easily just to get to a rehearsal studio and humping your guitars and your amps and everything else around. And after the last time that I did it, I thought, you know what, I'm too old for this. I'm 71 now.
Yeah.
I was 70 at the time, too old for this. And so I've virtually retired from playing now. Bamborough Beach, just over there, the other side of the castle, is I've made arrangements for when I go to have my ashes, and also 12. I've got 12 dogs' ashes that
Right.
I've had over the years. So I love dogs, and some very good friends of mine are going to dig a hole at low tide, halfway between the water and the high tide mark. Empty all the boxes in there and just let us go out with the tide. So it's a very short journey. It's only over there, as opposed from Essex. And hopefully that won't be for a while yet. But
thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.
I found it absolutely captivating. Take care of yourself, and I will speak to you very soon, mate.
Yeah, lovely. If anybody seeing this happens to be coming up to Northumberland, do give us a shout. I'm on Facebook. Fritz, Frakes, and meet up and have a few bevies. But I'll be back in Essex in July for the next reunion for the FSU, which is on the same day as the pensioners party.
It is, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
If you're there, I'll see you there, mate. God bless you, Paul.
God bless you too, mate.
And the work you're doing is wonderful for this.
Listen, take care of yourself. God bless you. Thank you so much for your time, and I will speak to you very soon.
Yeah. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.